I'm UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich.
I'm naturopath Doc Will Spencer.
I'm mindset expert Nicholas Spone. If you want to detoxify your cells, remineralize your body, and live up to your true health potential, you've come to the right place.
We are the Cell Saviors.
All right, this is kind of an unplanned video from an impromptu conversation we just had with our friend Nadine, who was asking about lentils, and we went off onto a whole conversational stream that was really good. I think most people need to hear it. And she said, you said no grains, nuts, and seeds, but what about lentils?
Very impromptu, yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't even tell you guys where we're going.
Sit down.
Well, you were just rolling over there, so I figured you were ready to go. So lentils,
I am ready to go.
Many of the world eats lentils or beans or both. They're great for us, right?
So they're great for the infection load that we carry in our bodies, absolutely, but they're highly detrimental to the human part of us.
And you had mentioned that foods like that were for to enslave people. So what did you mean by that?
So just go back 1,000 years, and you had the dudes in the castle with the fur coats and the scepters and sitting in the big chair, and then you had everyone else. You had the nobility, and then you had the slaves, and so it just so happens to be the nobility has now
Peasants, whatever.
call them slave peasants, the poor people. They've just now conned everybody into believing that this plant-based diet is for the nobility.
For the intelligent.
Yeah.
For the supremely intelligent and spiritually.
And the spiritually awakened, right?
And the spiritually awakened. This is well documented coming out of World War II, where the scientists, this out of Nazi Germany, where they did extensive research on a plant-based diet, mainly consisting of cereal grains, nuts, and seeds, where they fed them to the prisoners in mass and did all kinds of research, well documented. Pat likes to refer to Weimar Germany, where that was same time frame back in the 30s and 40s, where they fed the inmates different forms of grains, nuts, and seeds. And then they watched and observed and killed people and looked at their brains and their bodies to find out
How docile they became.
They became docile. It totally disrupted their hormones. It gave them enough calories, and this is the calorie BTU philosophy that everyone subscribes to today except me, where you don't run on BTUs, British thermal units, like a diesel engine. We actually run on amino acids coming from animal product if you want to be healthy.
And electricity.
Electricity. Yeah. So,
And
so fat.
We're not saying that vegetarians are Nazis by any means.
That's definitely not saying it. You're so funny.
Listen, but their intentions are pure. Sure, it's great. That's awesome.
Misguided.
And look,
100% misguided.
How many different categories of life have people gotten potentially miseducated and follow through and will refuse to actually go the other direction, even when it's causing them harm, right?
We did a video over the last few days about the ideal human diet, and we talked about animals and the species appropriate diet. And for humans, the species appropriate diet is mainly meat with a little bit of fruit and vegetables. I mean, I think
seasonal eating, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I remember seeing the story about such propaganda. They fed gladiators oats and oatmeal as a proof that these apex athletes were running on plant-based diet and grains.
Oh, well,
no, they were doing cheap food to keep people alive long enough to kill them in front of everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's just like, we gotta look deeper into this matter. So, and Will, you mentioned, as the slave diet, I guess it takes away that testosterone, the dopamine, the drive to do things, the ability to stand up for ourselves and think for ourselves.
I'm just going to interrupt this a little bit because Lee said something very triggering for me. Positive. The plant-based diet is loaded with what's called phytoestrogens and other phytic acids. Phytic meaning, or phyto meaning plant-based. And actually, those kinds of hormones, plant hormones, are highly detrimental to us, being monogastric, meaning we have one stomach. We have like a 3-hour transit time through that stomach into the small intestine. Unlike a herbivore, like a ruminant has 4 stomachs and about an 18-hour transit time through those stomachs, pretty much can eliminate most of the damaging effects of the plant chemistry, where we don't have that. It's no different. This is why dogs are having hip dysplasia, cancers, diabetes, all kinds of crazy stuff with dogs who are, they're by evolution, not the domesticated side of them, but they're wild cousins, if you will, the wolf, and the apex hunters. If you feed them a plant-based diet, they start falling apart a little faster than us. That's why we have hip dysplasia in dogs. That's why we have diabetes in dogs and cancer in dogs and blindness in dogs and all these other problems. They're designed not to eat all these plant-based stuff. We can do omnivore, kind of like a bear a little bit. So we can subside on some plants, but our main nutritional sources really need to come from animal products.
And you brought up cellulase, the enzyme. So talk about what animals have that, and
so us hunter-gatherers, omnivores, like a bear or raccoon, that can eat some plant material, but not as the mainstay. So plant material is made up of mostly of the structure of the plant of cellulose, which is that woody, non-digestible structure of the cells. You learn it I did in the 8th grade. That makes the stacking of the cellulose, that makes the structure of the plant that holds it upright, the oak tree.
The garden frame, the IBMs.
Absolutely. The frame that holds it together is made of cellulose. Well, in order to break that down so it's not detrimental and semi-digestible, you've got to create cellulase. We as humans do not create hardly any cellulase, but we do enough to break down, say, fruits and some of your waterier vegetables like peppers and cucumbers and lettuce, but berries. And so we don't create hardly any of that. Where a cow, a goat, a horse, that's the majority, because they subside mostly on plant material that's made up of this cellulose. And so that was the conversation. So lentils, getting back to lentils, which is a cereal nut grain seed in that category, is almost entirely structurally wise made up of this very undigestible cellulose. And we can't bust that open.
Goats must just be like cellulase factories. I mean,
oh yeah,
the A is the enzyme which makes the transaction happen.
Yeah.
Goats can digest beer cans. Let's be honest, but
I love you.
They're very unique. They're very unique. Yes.
We talked about sprouts and how those have a lot of chemistry. Those little baby plants have a lot of chemistry in them because they're so susceptible at that time to bugs and birds and different things.
We walk through the
let's briefly
historical biology,
sure.
So horticulture here. So plants cannot run from the enemy. So to protect the species, they put all kinds of natural chemistry into the babies, which is your cereal grains, nuts, and seeds, to perpetuate the species. And so when you take the grain, the seed, and it gets planted, it starts to grow. There's all this chemistry that's kind of dormant in the seed. And when it becomes alive, the germ becomes alive, the activity of the microbes turns everything on. There's moisture there. A lot of that chemistry, those phytic acids, they get released at that time to really make sure it's a pesticide is what it is to keep environment from encroaching on the seed to break it down. So
we're the pests.
We're the predators. And the pests, exactly. And so actually a sprout, in one way of looking at it, is even more toxic in the sprout, like the first 5-6 days.
Contains all the toxins.
Contains all the toxins, and they're active.
Sure.
And so this is why, I get a stomach ache when I drink wheatgrass juice. I have the whole time. I've never been good with wheatgrass juice ever. Like the first few times I tried it back in the early 80s, I vomited. Like it was not, my system was not good for that. And so that's where you something about, oh, what about wheatgrass? I'm like,
I was kind of messing with you, but they were
messing with me.
super high in oxalosuit, and I'm super sensitive to that, like instant joint pain.
I mean, I got people that
Our ancestors were not juicing wheatgrass. How about that?
Right.
they weren't even grazing wheatgrass.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, they weren't.
So, and then you can move on with this, but remember that in our system, that there's contracts for seeds, nuts, and grains. There's massive government contracts for education systems, for the military bases, for all of these things with soybean associations and all these.
And foreign aid too. We're sending bags full of these ag products for foreign aid because of those contracts.
Now, if they consider China an enemy, I will say this: send all of our soybeans there.
And all the wheat and rice and everything, send it to China.
If that's what you want to do, is to destabilize a nation because of its health, that's what you would do.
And one thing that comes to mind is the whole Kellogg thing and grains for breakfast. I mean, this was all really to get people to take away their sex drive, right? I mean, because he was
That's a very extreme stance, sir.
Well, no, well, this is also I know about that. I mean, his dogma and belief system was that any sexual urges were evil, and if we give people these grains, we're going to lower their sex drive and the temptations that go with it, and less reproduction and all of the things. I mean,
No, that's historically fairly accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, this is I even think Google might not be able to filter that out. Yeah.
Yeah, between the food and the chemicals that they're grown with and the chemicals in the water supplies, historically, this has gone on for a long, long time.
And we see this in men. Let's just use an example. Men across our nation are not the same.
I'm going to say it outright today. This might anger some people, and that's too bad if it does, but it's a factual situation. We have to address things and recognize, when I look at the changes in the male, American male over, my 50-some years on the planet, is that when I was a little kid, men were jacked. Men were strong. They all had deep voices. They were confident, people. That's not the case 50 years later. We're looking at men that are shaped like, and
identifying as
a 60-year-old woman, right? And so there's no muscle, narrow shoulders, wide hips, and big thighs, things like that. The deposits it's changing because of the testosterone levels, estrogen levels, and a lot of other things that are going on. It's not normal. It's not normal. I'm sorry.
And one thing I did ask you, Will, we can wrap this video up, was I said, what about fermenting things like lentils and beans, and does fermenting help? Grains even too.
With the gurus that are pushing the way they are fermenting and sprouting things today, no. Because, and I learned this from a 42-year professor of anthropology who studied this and taught this at Queen's University in New York. To completely disable all the phytochemicals and hormones that are in cereal grains, nuts, and seeds, to make them into a usable product, requires a 14-day process and 3 different fermentation cycles. And that fermentation has to be done, according to history, was done using mammary gland milk. So the organisms that were, whatever was in the milk of people, horse, goat, whatever the mammal milk was, they used for the fermentation. So they would sprout the grain, then they would dry it in the sun, then they would grind it up, then they would ferment it. Okay, let it go through a fermentation cycle. They would dry it, again, grind it again, ferment it again 3 times over the course of 14 days to disable all the the plant chemistry, to disable everything. So they're using the organisms, the native organisms that are in the mammal milk, to then break down all of the plant chemistry to disable everything. So then you end up with this powder that he turned into things like gruel, or a flour. That was a flour, but it was only through that process. Today, what do? They dry grind the grain to make the bread. or they sprout the bread kind of, and then they dry it and grind it and turn it into bread. So the things we have today, the cereals we have today, the breads, the pastas, the flours that we have today have not gone through that cycle to disable everything.
And we're not even talking about the synthetic chemicals that go on. No, I mean, that's a whole, these are the natural plant chemicals. And, you know, as you're talking about this, I'm just thinking, God, it's so much easier just to let it ferment inside a cow's stomach and to eat that cow. That's what I mean, and for all those, you know, that are vegetarian or vegan for spiritual reasons, you know, I feel for you, and I think we've all at some point had
A massive amount of compassion for animals.
wanted to try that, and nobody wants an animal to suffer. And the nature of the world we live in is our system.
Yeah, but this animal here is suffering from eating what they're told to eat.
Exactly. We're built for that. All life feeds on other life. And if you want to be a slave, if you want your mind to be controlled, if you want to be malleable and pliable and easy to program and weak and not have your hormones right, the slave diet is
Best way to go.
that's perfect for you. Grains, nuts, and seeds,
Plant material as a baby.
lots of sprouts, wheatgrass,
Not
and go see your doctor. For everybody else, get on the species appropriate diet, get the Cell Saviors regeneration kit, get those toxins out of your system.
But I think it's fair to say, look, I've got to stop you, because if I'm vegan or vegetarian, by what you're saying, look, it may be something, I'm going to consider this. I'm going to research at least and look at it. Still, philosophically, emotionally, other things that come into play, I don't want animals to die. We know that there's some bad ways of handling animals, right? So, but nonetheless, we have to take into consideration soil saviors products, if they're going to continue eating plants only, that's the way they should be grown.
Sure.
At least in that, we can still help them and help them as much as we can, because all the nutrients are going to be in the plant.
And I don't mean to be condescending, because I've definitely tried the vegetarian diet. I've tried vegan and
Work out for you.
I've done juice fasting, cleanses, and I've always had an open mind to, like, I'm not against it. I'll try all. I mean, you know me, like, I get an idea, I'm like, let's go take that to the extreme.
Right.
So I've tried all these things and been down these roads, and philosophically, evolutionarily, like, now I see it this way. That's in agreement with Dr. Wil and with you, and
Right.
that's how my health has started to recover. I'm feeling better on the ideal human diet. Any last thoughts, guys, on the slave diet?
That was the last thought I had. That's all.
No, I'm good for now.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate this. This is great. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for listening to the Cell Saviors podcast. To learn more about the Cell Saviors mission, or to buy the minerals and probiotics your body needs to thrive, visit cellsaviors.org.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider before making health decisions.